All right, today we're going to take a look at position hold tuning in INAV. We're going to talk about sensor accuracy. We're also going to talk about how you can analyze and just know how the whole thing works and look at your quad to see if you're not getting the position hold that you think you should be, or it's overshooting and kind of coming back to the position it needs to be. How you detect that and what you can adjust in the field just by knowing what the different symptoms are and what PID gains and things you need to adjust. And also we're going to take a look at how you can take a deeper look at it using Blackbox and all the fields within it and how they work. And yeah, a lot of good stuff. After this one, you should completely know how to really optimize position hold tuning in INAV and get the tightest position hold possible based on the sensors that you have on your craft. So let's get into it. Now, if you haven't checked out my previous video on altitude hold tuning, position hold is altitude hold as well. Obviously, in position hold, it's holding the altitude and the X and Y component. The Z is the altitude part. So it's the two things in once. What I would definitely recommend doing is doing your altitude hold tuning first. Once you have that squared and you're happy about that, then come back to your position hold. It's a lot easier. Yeah, you could do kind of everything at once, of course, at the same time, but they're two separate things. I would think your altitude hold is probably going to be off more and need a little bit more PID tuning than position hold. Position hold in INAV, you'll see the gains aren't too bad. It depends on the quadcopter too. Like I'm using a 5-inch. The gains still could use some adjustment for a 5-inch, but you know, if you're using a 10-inch or a cine lifter, they could probably even use even more adjustment. But so mileage may vary, but nevertheless, they're two separate topics. I'll make a link to that video in the upper right if you want to check out the altitude hold. Today, we're just going to be talking about position hold, so it's the lateral movement, X and Y. I already have this quadcopter tuned for altitude hold. For the tuning parameters for position hold, first you're going to go into the PID tuning tab. Then at the upper right, you're going to hit the show all PIDs and then browse down to here, and then you should see your PID gains right here. Again, the altitude hold PIDs are right here. See that other video for more detail on that. And you'll likely need some adjustments to these, I would say. The position hold values are here. So you can see position X and Y, velocity X and Y, and then we don't have a surface tracking, so you don't have to worry about that. Very much so, you can see that, you know, how this makes sense. So you have the X and Y position, like on a grid, that is your position hold. And then your vertical, which would be your Z axis, that's your altitude hold parameters. As talked about in my basics of navigation modes, again, I'll make a link to that up in the upper right as well. Two PID controllers that are controlling it, just like in altitude hold. Position holds the same. You have a position estimator and then a velocity estimator as well. So this estimates where it wants to be and where it's at. And then this has to do with a PID controller for moving back and forth to get onto this position. Now, what can be a little tricky with these two is that if it's not holding the position that it needs to be, that likely means that your position estimator value right here, which is only a P gain, as you can see right here, you just, with multi-copters, you only have a P gain to adjust for that one. But if it's not holding the position tightly enough, it could be the number of satellites that you have, that's just not enough accuracy. And you can see that in your OSD, and we'll show you that here in a second. Or it could be that that P gain needs to be higher. Now, conversely, if you see it overshooting a lot, where it's holding position, but it's like kind of going left, and then it's going right, and it's going left, and it's going right or back and forth, like this, and not toilet bowling. So if you get a toilet bowl and it's going in a circular motion, recalibrate your magnetometer. But if you see that it's kind of just overshooting, and it would probably be pretty quick, like poof, 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 poof. That's probably because that P gain is too high. So you'd want to lower that. So those are the two visual things you can do just in the field using the OSD and adjusting that gain up and down. Of course, in Blackbox, which we're going to show here shortly, how you can just take a log and you can see exactly what it is, and then you're not guessing as much, because there is a component where it could be the velocity. But again, if it's quickly overshooting back and forth in one or both ways, then it could be, it's probably that gain's too high. If it's kind of just veering off and it's taking a while for it to get back, like a little gust of wind pushes it off and then it slowly makes its way back, that P gain probably needs to be increased. Now, the second component to that is the velocity X and Y, and this has to deal with the motion of the quadcopter and how fast it's getting there. And there you have a normal P, I, D, and feed forward PID controller here. So for that one, if you're noticing that it goes off track, it comes back quickly, but then it overshoots, it comes back, and then it kind of oscillates a little and settles, that's going to be your velocity PIDs. That's not, if it continues, if your position PIDs and it keeps oscillating and just keeps oscillating, keeps oscillating, keeps oscillating, that's going to be your position XY is too high. Or if it's blowing off and it takes forever for it to come back, again, position XY. But if you're getting it and it's kind of coming over and overshooting back and forth, and then it finally settles, that's most likely your velocity X and Y. If you're getting a scenario where it's overshooting slowly and then it kind of comes back slowly, that's, again, you kind of got to know your PI and D terms. Personally, I really think you should just be logging this. It's a lot of guessing to some extent where you can just log it. You just look at it, which I'm going to show here in a second, and you exactly know what you need to do. To get some information while you're out in the field, either trying to manually kind of do it without logging and see what's what I would highly recommend doing is going into the OSD and turning on some of your RC adjustment values. Here you can see the position X and Y PIDs, Z, velocity X and Y PIDs, and Z. This would just give you your PID gain, so you can kind of see those on the OSD, know where they're at, and then if you're heading to some DVR, you know which DVR is which. The other thing you kind of want to turn on is go down here to your PID controller outputs. This is going to show, now again, this is fixed wing is FW, multicopter is MC, so you're only going to be interested in multicopter for this video. MC velocity X, MC velocity Y, Z, and then you can see position X, Y, and Z. So that's going to be up here. This is in my position X, Y, and Z, and then you can see my velocity X, Y, and Z here as well. So you want to turn those on. They will give you some sense of it. As the more you practice with this, the more you'll see it, but you'll be able to see, like if it's drifting off, is your P for position, so it's going to be your X. Is that actually pushing? Is this value going up to push it back onto where it needs to be? Are you starting to see this kind of overshoot back and forth? The numbers going up, the numbers going down, up and down, up and down. Same thing for the Y, same thing for the Z here as well. So you can kind of use those to analyze in flight. And again, DVR overlay for in Blackbox if you're going to do that as well. And that's how you would know if it's not holding position and you're not sure if it's the number of satellites is too light or if it's your PID gains. Obviously, what you can see here is if it's blowing off and you don't see these values going up, that's just your sensor doesn't even know that it's off. So this gives you an indication of, is your sensor accurate enough for the accuracy you're looking for? You can just look at this position X, Y, and Z to know, hey, is it pushing? If it is, that means your sensor is working. It's telling it to move back on track, and then it has to do with PID gains between the position estimator or the velocity estimator. Now for Blackbox recording, if you're not familiar with that, it's very simple. Go into here, set it up. Hopefully you have some onboard flash or an SD card. I just check all these things on, set your Blackbox rate. I don't think it lets you do anything more than 0.5 to 1, which is fine. And you don't need to set a mode to record Blackbox. As soon as you arm next time, it will start to record as long as your flash space is empty or you have space on the SD card. As soon as you arm, it will start to record, and I just check all these things on. Make sure to hit save and reboot here, of course. Now to get these moves, you go out, you set position hold, and then you take the sticks and you go right and you go left and you go right and return to the center, and see if the quadcopter moves over and see how it settles into its new position. Go to the left, see how it settles in. Go forward, see how it settles in. Go backwards, see how it settles in. And just do a bunch of those. Forward, stop, backwards, stop, forward, stop, backwards, stop, right, stop, left, stop, back, stop. You got the idea. The best thing to do is just get Blackbox of it, like I said. And I will drop a link down below where you can download this build of the beta flight of the INAV Blackbox Explorer that I have made some tweaks to. Those tweaks have been pushed back, but I made just a couple extra tweaks. So if you're watching this video in the now, you're going to want to download this. If you're watching this video in the future, I would say a couple months in the future, a month or week, I'll submit these changes as well. Then you should be able to just get the latest version of the Blackbox Explorer, but it's not released yet. So I think the next version of Blackbox Explorer is going to be 7. So anything prior to 7.0 or anything that, if you have 5.0, you're definitely going to need to download it from my link down below. If it's after the 5.0 release, you should be good. Should have this stuff in here. I'm also going to put a link down below to my UAV Tech trace templates. I'm going to be using that for the video. So check those out. You download those. You would hit, it's a JSON file. You will open the log and then hit open here again and click the JSON file, and then that will load the trace templates. And you can use the keyboard, the numbers above the letters. We're going to be using like 1, 2, 3, 4, and that will change the trace template that you're on. So you'll hear me say I'm on trace template 1, 2, so on and so forth. The other thing that this version of Blackbox Explorer, the changes I've submitted in, it allows you to take the zoom percentage here all the way down to 2%, which is you're going to want to do because you're going to want to see plenty of navigation mode stuff's not really fast. So you're going to want to be able to zoom way out to be able to kind of see patterns. So we're going to be zooming out here to 2%, and let's get into what each one of these means. So the first up here is roll input, and you can just click on this little blue box here and it will kind of just put that one up on the screen. So in this one, we have RC data 0, which is going to be your roll axis, and this is your raw inputs. Your set point roll, which is, this is the quadcopter's PID controller, actually controlling your roll. So this set point is tied to this little graph up here. So when you see this moving around like that, that's the quad actively trying to hold its position. It's only when you see this RC data 0 up here moving that I'm actually applying a stick input. And then it's, of course, doing the same thing because it has an extra push to go that direction where I'm giving a stick input to. And then finally down here, we have the RC throttle. That's just some information. You can see throttle bumping up and down here. And then obviously when I give a little bit more roll, it has to bump up the throttle a little bit here to keep the altitude. The next one is the navigation position. So you can see the target position is target 0, nav position, this is the actual position, again 0, and then this is the P term. So this is how much the P term is pushing. If you increase the P gains back in the configurator that we showed, then that will, you'll see this line get bigger for pushing harder to get towards the intended target. You can also see here, like, for example, here, it's overshooting. You can also see, for example, here very quickly that it's oscillating. It's not oscillating a lot, but it's oscillating a little. Now, you got to keep in mind, it was a little windy there that day too, that I did this. So if you have some gusts of wind, that could cause this kind of oscillation behavior because it's not going to be just uniform the whole time. The quadcopter is going to adjust and come back and adjust and come back, and it's going to have a little bit of that. So if it's a wind still day, then and you start to see little things like these, a little bit of oscillations in there, I can tell you you're probably right about where that P gain needs to be. If it's radical, then you probably want to bring it down. We do want to address this overshoot here, but that is not necessarily the P gain for this. So we'll talk about that here in a second. So that's what's in this one. The next up is the MC multicopter velocity PIDs. And in this one, you will see this is your P, I, and D gains. So let me just turn this down a little bit here. So you can see the burnt orange line here is the target. So that's where it's going to be. And then the velocity. So this is a velocity in the Y direction. Like, what's the target velocity to go to the right or the left? And then what's the actual velocity going to the right or the left? You can see it's in meters per second. And then you got the PID and feed forward gains to adjust this, and it just works like any other PID controller. Finally, down at the very bottom, we just have the motor outputs, which didn't log right in this one for some reason. And then the sum of the PI and D gains from the velocity output, so you can kind of see what the output is and then look at that versus the motors. But this log's messed up for some reason. I don't know why it didn't get they're always 100% in this log, which is not accurate. So generally what I first do when I open this up is I get onto this and I try to look for patterns, and you want to see if you're overshooting. So I see this big overshoot here, which does not make me, I don't love that. And I'm looking down here, and you can turn Expo on and off by using the X key. And I'm looking to see if I have a big overshoot down here as well. Now I don't see the overshoot here, but I do see this big overshoot here. So you can see how if I make this turn the X back up, and you can actually see overshoots better with turning expo off. So make sure you do that trick. But you can see how it's supposed to get to this point and not any further, and it overshoots way down here, and it comes back up. So that can easily result in this overshoot down here, can easily result in this overshoot up here. So that's where it gets kind of tricky. So again, it's not a consistent overshooting, like whoop, 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 like I talked about before. That when you see that kind of oscillation, that means this P gain's too high. But if it's like an overshoot, then comes back, that's probably your velocity PIDs have an overshoot in them. And you can see generally I'm overshooting all the time. Like it's just overshooting this line all the time. It's always going back up, it overshoots, goes back down, it overshoots, comes, you know, you can just kind of see a general tendency of overshoot, overshoot, overshoot. And again, you want to be zoomed way out to kind of see that. Again, I'm seeing a ton of overshooting on my velocity PIDs. Overshoot, overshoot, overshoot. And that is dragging this to overshoot on my position all the time. Overshoot, you get the gist. Overshoot, overshoot, overshoot. So what do we need to do that to fix that? We'll talk about that here just in a second. The other thing I want to look at is I want to really take a close look since I'm detecting this overshoot. I don't see it so much consistently up here where it's kind of like an oscillation-y thing. I see it more down here, which I got to get this settled, and then I can go back up to here and see if this goes away, which it should. So I'm going to come back in here. I want to look a little closer on this, and I want to specifically look to see how my I gain is reacting comparatively. So let's just take that I gain. I'm going to set this to 5 just to be nice and thick so you can really see that line. And I want to look to see that are these overshoots the same matching kind of curve as my I gain? Because I is for instability, and it should not be what is driving the quadcopter to get to its new position. So when you see that this I gain is winding up to push, you know, the P gain's trying to push, feed 4 is trying to push, and you can see the P gain here, the red line is really pushing, but it's not getting it there. We have this big delay, so the I gain starts to wind up, and that's not what the I gain should be doing. It should not be pushing. That's the P gain's term. I gain is for like general instability, like a steady wind pushing against it. The I gain will build up to push against that wind and just kind of hold it there if you have a somewhat steady wind. We're in imbalance in the quad. You know, we're like, hey, I need to be kind of lifting to the right or pitching back because I have this heavy cine lifter camera up front. So I need to be pitching way back just to hold steady. That's an imbalance that it's adjusting for. Not I gain should not be doing P for pushing. So again, looking to see, I do see some of it, not a ton worse, but what that's telling me is I need my relationship between my P and the I need a little bit more P in relation to my I gain. The I's pushing a little bit too much. Also, there's quite a delay here between these two, so getting a little bit more feed forward won't hurt. I mean, there is practical limitations against how close that's going to be able to track, but you can see here it's not too bad. So, you know, what I'm detecting here is I'm seeing the I gain kind of pushing a little bit, not great, and I see a lot of delay in here as well. So that's telling me things. My P gain in relation to my I gain needs to go up. The other thing that I'm seeing here is that overshoot, 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 constant overshoot. So my D gain in relationship to my P gain needs to go up as well. So I'm going to be raising my Ds. I'm going to be raising my Ps. Probably raise my Ds double what they are, raise my Ps a quarter what they are, and leave the I gain alone. So that those two relationships, and you know, my I gain stays where it's at. Raise my Ps up, and then also raise my Ds twice that amount because I have quite a bit of overshoot here, as you can see. So that's how you can kind of know how those work. And if that's all Greek to you, I will drop another link down below to my website, and where it talks about the basics of how a PID controller works and how those ratios between the gains work. Of course, we're going to do that on the roll axis, look at that, and then we're going to also look on the pitch axis and look at the same. Now, to some extent, it doesn't matter a whole ton. You have to pick because you don't have independent PIDs for your roll and pitch. It's the X and Y together are the same PIDs. So you got to pick your evil there, but I am still getting overshooting on my pitch, just like I was on the roll. So we're in good shape for that, and I know what to do to fix it. So coming back on into the configurator, you can see these are the defaults down here. It's 65 on the P for the position estimator for X and Y. And then you can see you got 40, 15, 100 for the D term, and 40. So quite a bit of difference in ratios compared to what you normally see up here in your main PID controller. What I'm going to decide to do is bring down that P just a little bit, 5 points. That's not very much, just 5 points. I see a little bit of oscillating behavior there on the position XY. I may regret that and go back up. We will see. But that was my position estimator. And then on my velocity X and Y, I'm going to increase that to 50, leave my I alone, like I talked about, since that one was pushing a little, it's pushing a little bit more. I want the P to do the pushing. So if I don't, the reason the I gain is pushing is because P's not doing its job. If P's not doing its job, the I gain kind of comes in and cleans up. But that is not good because it will drag the quad to overshoot if this guy gets involved. So you do not want him pushing. You just want him correcting for I for imbalance. So P is the pusher. We're going to raise him up, leave him alone, and we're seeing a ton of overshoot. This guy's not pushing enough in relation to the I, but when he is pushing in relation too much to the D, the damping. So I'm going to increase that quite a bit from 100 to 135, and we're going to see how that goes. In addition, I'm going to double my feed forward gains. Feed forward is not a very powerful gain, so I'm going to double that. That can also lead to some overshoot. So we'll see where that goes. If you want to take that out of the equation and be a purist about it, what you can do is set that to 0. Now you're still going to get a lot of delay, but you will take out the potential overshoot component of feed forwards. I'm going to give it a go at 80, see where it goes, but the next step, if I still see some overshooting, I might do that next. So that might be advised. I'm going to not take my own advice in that scenario. But yeah, going to go save that up and run that and see how it goes. Do note up top here what the Z position and Z velocity was, like 50, 100, 50, and 10. In my last session for the altitude hold, I ended up changing that to 200, 150, 35, and 30. So quite a bit of difference and changes there that needed quite a bit more pushing elements to it to really make it stay on that velocity or on that altitude. And if you didn't watch that altitude hold video, that took this, where it was a bunch of overshooting here and this thing going way off course for altitude hold, and it turned it into this, where it was much tighter holding the altitude, and it didn't have so much overshooting here as well. So I'm expecting, and that is what I'm going to be targeting for this here as well. Now I may need to make some other tweaks, and that will be another video. If you're interested in that video, go ahead and check out the link below. I will be posting that up to my Patreon, for Patreon's kind of like the follow-up to this, to see the outcome and any other little tweaks I needed to make. But this is a long enough video for now. Thanks, everybody. I hope this helped. If you have any issues, continue, or didn't cover something clearly with you, don't hesitate to drop those down in the comments. I'm hopeful this is really helpful for people. I don't think there's any other content out there on the internet for INAV for navigation mode tuning. And one last thing, I did see some comments in some other videos about folks wanting that to more slowly come in to the target. So that overshooting, they might be seeing the same thing I am, where the default behavior kind of goes past and then comes back. Well, we just talked about how to fix that. Or if you want it to be even more slowly to come in, just overdo it on the D gains. So you can be overdamped, not dampened, overdamped. So instead of raising those Ds to like 130, make it 150 or something like that. And you can also move conversely, it's the ratios between the two. So if you don't want to go that high on the D, that means then you have to drop the P. But if you drop the P, then you should probably drop the I as well. This will be the final link I'll drop down in the video description. This is my PID calc tool. So if you're needing to adjust some gains and that whole ratio stuff in between, you can just type in the gains up here. Just Doesn't matter if it says roll, pitch, and yaw. You can type in whatever you want up here, and then adjust your ratios here to kind of keep things in lines. And if you want to move them all up or all down together, but to hold the ratios, you can just use this master multiplier thing and type that in. And this moves these up and down. Just a little handy tool. You can pull it up on your phone out in the field, or of course on your desktop computer or tablet. All right, that's it. I'm going to get out of here. If this helped you and it made your position hold better, give me a comment down below. I'd love to hear it. Drop a link to your video. I'll share it out. Thanks, everybody. See you on the next one.